Or chase him yourself, because who needs a man?
I think she's gonna call him. She's not that stupid, right? Hold on, she's still gonna call him, okay?
Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about Batman Caped Crusader, because you guys really loved it when I talked about it last time, so we're going to talk about it after we watch the show. We've been telling you that it's probably not going to be that good, but now we watched it, so let's find out if it was really good, or if it was not really good. So we watched all 10 episodes of this show.
Well, first of all, I know that different reactions from you when we talked about those previews about like what we could expect about the show. And I think, you've seen the conversation around this show change slowly because I remember when we called out the show back when it was first announced in like I think 2021 when it was announced that it was going to be a modern reimagining, which going back to those comments now, it's like, wow, we were spot on about that. It was a modern reimagining. A Gotham City, a 1940s Gotham City, no less, which is kind of adds to my general issues that I kind of had going into this show, which is that I didn't want it to be more of the modern same thing that we usually get with a lot of these reimaginings, these with the franchises in general, as we've seen with Star Wars. That takes place also in the past, and you have a very modern take, not just from like the demographics and diversity, but also the themes that they deal with, which are very progressive, and you kind of take a look at everything else that's being put out there, including Marvel now. Which was always kind of like this safe brand. Now that's also become very charged in terms of the modern way of storytelling, how that goes, and the certain tropes that come with that. So I think this show, once I saw it, it was basically seeing what I was already kind of expecting, which I had a lot of red flags. And unfortunately, those red flags came to fruition. And I think it's interesting because when we did talk about like Harley Quinn, I know that, and certain people did take issue with that, but then certain stuff about Penguin came out, and then suddenly a lot more people started to be a lot more nervous about it. And I just thought that whole thing was interesting, and maybe you could speak more to that. But generally speaking, I think the show was exactly what I thought it was.
Yeah,
Unfortunately,
the show was, it was, even the only thing that like set it in the 40s was some of the look, like the outfits and stuff somewhat, but there's still was pretty modernish, and nothing about the story you could have told that it was in the 40s or 30s or whatever. Like just from whether the types of people they had in the show or just the way things they had, like, we at one point we thought they were going to pull out a cell phone, like, and I wouldn't have been surprised if they did.
there you go. She has a cell. Never mind. I was actually going to laugh for a second if she had pulled out a cellular phone.
Because they didn't like follow it. They didn't follow it to being in the 40s at all. You would have never known it was in the 40s by what they showed. But as they like to tell us, it's an Elseworld story. But I mean, it's just still, if they're trying to put it in this time period, then they should have made it more accurate to that time period. And that's not just including the very diverse cast of characters that we had in this show, but that was very, very noticeable throughout the entire series.
Well, that's the thing. It's like Elseworld stories. That's always a double-edged sword. For me, it's not even a double-edged sword. It's really just a gun that's pointing your way, because I think you can do a lot more stories that you already have with the universe. You really just need one universe, and I think this obsession with having different iterations, and I call them perversions, really revisions that change what was original. And I know that comic books have a very skewed history of like what happened, and it's a very convoluted and everything, but I think you can streamline it in a sense that gives it a purpose. And I think, such as the cases with this, it's like it gives you so many opportunities to take the brand that you had and basically twist it to what it isn't. And I think you can definitely see that with how they treat Batman himself in this show, which, the show is called Batman Caped Crusader, but you really only get like I think like only half of the episodes. 50% of the show was about Batman as the main character. With every other episode, you have an instance of the supporting characters that are taking the the lead, and I would actually go on to say that because I really think the show should be called Batman and Co. or like Batman and Family or something. It's not even a family, it's just a bunch of other characters that kind of speak to one another, and some of them you can get a lot more intimate scenes than they should.
Left off.
How later? Oh no. Already? But it's like even though the last episode, it's not even about Batman. It's more about all the characters we've come to know. So it's really not even. I wouldn't even say it's like 50% of Batman. It's really kind of like maybe 50 or like 43% of the show is actually about this main character, which is insane because this is. Imagine if this was, if this were somebody else, like somebody's first go at the character.
Hmm. Yeah, well, kind of
Insane.
breaking it down. So we watched all 10 episodes, and it was probably episode 3 or 4 before we actually got like a decent look at Batman. Like the first couple episodes was all focusing on Barbara Gordon, Renee Montoya, a little bit of Jim Gordon, but not too much even of him. It was mostly about those two. And then we finally started to get a little bit of Batman, and the first thing they did was try to delve into his psyche and try to they kind of portrayed as I know you noticed they portrayed Batman as kind of mentally unstable, which I think Bruce Timm even hinted towards that in some of his interviews. That
Yes, I have. I actually have the. It's great that you mentioned it because I have it here in those of you who think we're kind of like messing things up or we're kind of projecting onto it. I have it here. This is from an actual interview with Entertainment Weekly, I believe. It says we tried to wipe out the foregone conclusion that he is a hero, whether it's for the police, regular citizens of Gotham, or the viewer. So right there, you see that they are trying to remove this notion that he's possibly a hero, not only to the characters, which you might think, oh, well, it's just the characters, right? To the audience, it's very clear that he's a hero. He has his true motives that we're only aware of. But no, Bruce Timm is saying, no, actually, I want you to, as an audience member, I want you to question whether Batman is even a hero in this,
well, yeah,
which
because they
is
definitely do that. Like even all the way up to the last episode, you're still like Batman's really not shown tons of heroic things. In fact, there's even some scenes that will spoil it. We're gonna spoil this too. Just get over that. But Batman kills some people. At least it looks that way.
the actual case. Oh, there you go. What the heck? He actually killed them.
He just pulled a Zack
What the
Snyder.
flip?
And at the end of the last episode, he does something very un-Batman that was pretty much as we talked about when we were actually watching it. It was just mostly like a shock value. No.
Oh gosh.
You're just some lousy vigilante. I'm a
Why?
damn cop.
Why go there? This is pure shock value right now. This is so stupid. Okay. So psychotic.
Batman picks up the gun and he's going to shoot the guy, but he doesn't really shoot the guy. But they're kind of trying to make you think that. And then honestly, the way that they made Batman in the show, you probably wouldn't have been surprised if he shot the guy. Like wouldn't have surprised me if they actually went through with it.
This is why I think I would go on to say that this is actually a really bad show because sure we have all this like for us of course we know who Batman is and we have that sort of perspective, but even with that perspective you can just look at the entire show and be like that's not Harley Quinn, that's not what's his name, Bullock, that's not Gordon, that's not this character, that's not that character, it's none of them. And so you think okay, well this is for newcomers maybe, and then you realize that okay, so what is the takeaway for people to have when it comes to Batman, the character that you're supposed to gravitate towards? Well, he's not the main character in the first episodes, and like we said, not even really a main character in most of his series, but also the fact that he's the first thing you get introduced to is his, like you mentioned, his sessions at the psychologist, which is like, oh, so this guy is mentally unstable. We saw him like outright kill a bunch of guys. He just rams them with his car, and then at the same time, he is in the second episode, I believe, when he's being hunted, or maybe that's episode four. That's episode four, where he rams straight into a bunch of police cars, and we do see a bunch of policemen inside of them. That's because it turned on like the one from the movie. Oh my gosh, look at this. What the actual... This is insane. And as we spoke during our reactions, like, what's the hurry? There's no reason for him to literally ram into those police cars. He could have taken a different road. He's not chasing after a bad guy. He's not in a hurry. He literally chose to ram into those guys who were haunting him, but he really could have just taken a different route. And even if he was somebody that was chasing a goon or like a villain in that moment, he's driving the Batmobile. He definitely would have caught up to that person if he was chasing someone. So even if you had that, it's beyond. I think it's unquestionably ridiculous what they did with his characterization, and I think they never reached a point where it's like, no, actually, the real side of Batman is the one that is actually a good guy. He is level-headed. He knows what he's doing. I think Batman in the series is in general very chaotic. When he enters into a apartment, I believe it's him who, when Renee Montoya enters the building, he's the one who kind of like wrecks the whole place just because he was looking for this one thing.
Maybe Batman went into there. Yeah. So
okay. He left doors open.
He wouldn't have never opened the door. He wouldn't have. Batman would not have done that. They've got to tell me that Batman is not. He found it that way. There's no way. Someone else had to have done that. Batman would not have tossed a place like that and left it.
And it's just ridiculous how they just portray the character of Batman. Like, for newcomers, this would be a disaster if this was their first.
Well, there's so many instances of Batman doing stupid things in this show that were just so uncharacteristic. Like there's when he's trying to pull the kids out of a burning building, he leaves one in the building and he's like, "Hey, Gordon, go back and get that kid." And then there's the guy that Two-Face sets on fire, and Batman just turns like, "Oh, he's dead already. I'm just gonna go chase Two-Face and forget the guy that's burning alive right now."
Yeah, even though like the guy inside screams at the top of his lungs, and he's like, "Oh yeah, he's just gonna go after Two-Face, I guess."
And then he also like he doesn't even really that good of his job. Like the one episode, he just follows around Montoya. All the clues, she's the one doing all the work, and he's just like tracking her with like a microphone in her jacket, like following her around. And like he didn't do anything in the episode. And there's a lot of things he's just like following people around. He's not actually doing any detective
the microphone, work. Remember at the end, the microphone
just falls off.
That's
She's gonna figure it out.
She just bent over and it fell. That's all it took. It falls off at the end, very casually. So you're telling me that microphone would have, it just so happens that it fell off. But
well, you could tell the theme about going after like the rich guys, like the whole Harley Quinn episode. All the guys that she had captured were all these like rich guys who don't care about the little guy.
Well, not just rich guys; it's a rich white
men. Yeah. And so that was kind of like also when Montoya's interrogating him, she's like, "He's the rich white guy. He doesn't care about me. I'm the, the underclass Latina woman that is only a cop because Jim Gordon is keeping me a cop," which is what they say in the show. That he's basically the only reason she's in there is because Gordon is keeping her around. No one else is like pushing for her to be in the force.
If there's one thing I would say, it's like obviously the art style. Bruce Timm is amazing, but I think we can all say now without a doubt, and I've been saying this for a couple of years now, that Bruce Timm is a no one without Paul Dini. His work falls flat, and we have so many instances like the Batman and the Harley Quinn animated movie, and like all those other comic books, and Batman Killing Joke, where it's like, what are you doing, Bruce Timm? And you realize that, oh, it was Paul Dini. And then you play Batman Arkham Asylum, you play Batman Arkham City, you read Paul Dini's comic books, and Bruce Timm isn't attached to them, and you realize that, oh, it's Paul Dini who actually really understood the characters, and then that Bruce Timm was really there to helm the art style, which is incredible, I think, in like the original the animated series, but also I think here there are moments that stick out. So like from that perspective, it's good, but to kind of like push past that, even for a TV series like this, it's very bare bones. I think aesthetically, it's all over the place. I think they like we got one amazing shot of the Gotham City, and you think, wow, this city is incredible. But then, for the most part, you have a city and all the other shots where actually action happens, and it's not just one landscape. And I think really you only get like two shots in a series where you get like these incredible shots of the architecture.
We,
Everything else you see in the show is just regular buildings and that are not even populated. There's only cops running around.
no civilians.
Sometimes, yeah, and then sometimes they just sprinkle in a bunch of cars on the road, but that's like also rare to happen. It's usually just a very empty street. So much for like a inspired version of Gotham City being like an inspired version of New York City or even Chicago. It's like no, it's not that. So it's like, what happened there? Do you think like they had some, I don't know,
I
like
mean,
budget
they were
cuts
supposed to
or
be. I thought they were having a big budget for a cartoon, but apparently they didn't want to draw all that. But even if you think about like, even though we talked about how like the style looked good, like the drawing, but when we both talked about while we were watching like how the weird like the walking was, some of the action scenes like it was very weird and clunky sometimes, like the way that they walked and did stuff. It was really odd and it didn't fit with what was pretty good like character animations for the most part. He jumps across the
no.
roof, like it looks like the way they're running right there. It's like yeah, it's wonky. So,
Like in that, yeah, of course. I mean, it was going to be about that.
but like the some of the action scenes were not good, and that was like something that really kind of took you out of it sometimes.
And so, like, you have the 1940s aesthetic, but then you have all these diversity characters, all this modern day demographics just sprinkled in there. You have lesbians and Asians that make up a large chunk of the population at that time, which is like okay, new stimuli, I guess. And like if you look at the demographic at that time, the population, and it's not what the show is, of course, and I'm confused as to why they were going for that
Well, it's
angle.
like
I
I
guess
feel
it was
like that in a lot of
yeah,
modern media when they try to replay the reason one of the reasons that they put like all these diverse characters in older shows is they're like trying to like rewrite history, like they're trying to pretend that it wasn't the way that it was. There wasn't as many like black people and Asians like walking around in high positions in the 1930s as there is in modern day. So they kind of are putting it in this situation like, well, it was always like this. It was always diverse and always inclusive. Even back then, they're just trying to like kind of put that in our heads in so many different shows and media anymore that this is how it was. Kind of like trying to like retrain us to think that it's always been this way, and it just hasn't. And if you really want it to be accurate, not saying you couldn't have any black people in it, but like just the way that they had it everywhere, it was so much. It was so in your face the whole
I don't
show.
know. I don't know if I'll agree that they want to write history because I think the people who write these type of shows, they with themselves and say, "Oh, the past was always racist. Everything from the past is evil, bad." So, I actually think it's about more about
An
um,
idealized version.
an idealized version, and really just speaking of appropriation, they're just really appropriating the past and aesthetics that came before, and also sanitizing things in a way that uh, they're trying to appropriate it. Why to kind of take those mythos that were so iconic back then and say we're taking them over. Why do you think there are so many so-called mantles in comic books now? Is where you have like Sam Wilson is now Captain America. It's like the thing you liked, yeah, now it's taken over by this more diverse version of this character. I think that's what they're doing more here. They're trying to like supplant their ideology everywhere. Yeah. So I think that's really the case. And also like the accents of like and then like the jargon or like the language they were using was hilarious because the voice acting was just all over the place with this where they're kind of like using the 1940s language like
Just
oh not
sporadically.
meant and then sometimes just outright forget about it.
Mm.
It was just ridiculous and
I
also
didn't notice them using it hardly at all. Like I think I heard a few times I heard them try to say some things like usually, but it sounded very obvious like they was like trying to force let's throw in some old jargon, you know, and it's like oh okay, but it was very like forced in. It wasn't like just like a natural part of their dialogue because it didn't happen a lot.
how many voice actors did they have in this? I think they had like 7 or 8 of the same voice actors. Just
Well, I say this Batman's got a lot of moxie.
it's
Thank
Yuri
God
again.
someone gave these
I
kids.
don't know.
He's been beating the tar out of muggers.
It's Yuri again.
Away from me, you!
It's Yuri again.
On yourself, old man.
acting as the background characters. Like, what's up with this budget? And like people will say, well, who cares? It's about the story. The story itself is just not good. Like, okay, the first episode is like what? Female penguin. Okay. And I think her actual name, I don't know if I've heard it in the show, but
I
apparently
think it
it
was
is Oswaldo.
Oswaldo, I believe,
It,
is
it
what
is, okay.
Actually, Oswalda, I was there.
they didn't just change Jim Gordon. They changed Harley Quinn. They changed Penguin. Flask, which is usually like the dirty cop in the show, he was changed to a black guy. They had Barbara Gordon, which I don't think they showed it any promotional, but obviously because Jim Gordon was black, she was black, but she had red hair still, so they didn't want to completely erase gingers, but they came close. And so like a lot of the main characters were switched like that. And then also the one thing that I noticed a lot, they not only made them like that, but they made them very large characters. Like especially Montoya and Harley were just like very, very large characters.
You mean that
Yeah.
is, I think, what the word you were looking for?
Yeah, they're like in this super broad shoulders, super wide, and it's like it just looks so wide because like Barbara Gordon was the only one that was kind of shaped normal, and then especially when they were standing next to each other, it's like whoa.
And saw you two outside. Mind if I join?
Look at how wide she is. Like even the shoulders and everything.
Harley.
Keep your chin up, Barbie.
And so they went all out, not just with like skin color, but they changed like everything. And then not to mention the fact that basically every character had like things that they took and changed from like how they're supposed to be, like little things, but still enough. Like they made Bullock the dirty cop, which Bullock is maybe not always the best cop always portrayed, but he's not like a dirty cop. So I was like kind of thought that was kind of unnecessary. Different things like that they changed. Barbara Gordon's a lawyer. Why? Because we need her to be a lawyer. Because being a librarian or whatever or a hacker tech person is not good enough, and obviously can't do that in the 40s. But then again, maybe they could because they didn't really follow any of that 40s stuff.
It really makes you think about like what the point of the show is, because I know Bruce Timm said, oh, this is our opportunity to make something even better than the animated series, because now we can actually delve into these mature themes and topics. But when you kind of like take a step back and you look at everything, you're like, everything you see here is really just a watered down version of the animated series, and not really just that, even just the character in the comic books and everything. Like if you look at the villains, every single villain, and I would maybe say character, but you can especially see it in the villains and the titular hero himself, at the very least. They are watered down versions of what you had. Worst case scenario, they are just total twists and perversions of what you had before. It's like a total opposite in it. And even like somebody like Harley Quinn, where they're like, oh, we're going to flip the personalities. So her civilian self, she is the version that is bubbly and quirky, but her villain self is very composed and monotone. And then you're like, okay, let's see where this goes. Like, what is the reason for the creative vision? Even though I
Just
still
to change
disagree
it.
with it. Yeah.
All the changes they made didn't really serve any story purpose. It was just let's just change it to change it. There wasn't any story purpose to it.
What was the deal? Like, remember with all the Robins that they kind of introduced, and
Then
then
there
they
was-
just
That's gotta be Robin. That's gotta be Robin. It's a circus.
Robin.
They're just like want to throw in like, hey, let's throw in a bunch of Robins. So they put in bring a bunch of orphan kids and like there's Dickie and Steffi and JC and Carrie and like it's all these Robin kids and it's like okay, remember look Robins, ooh.
So I line up my shot, and blam! Knock her right in the head. No way! Darn tootin', I saved Batman!
And then they had some Wednesday Addams look-alike that was sucking their souls and it's like okay, it's good stuff.
Dickie? What's wrong with him?
She sucked his soul.
What are you doing?
I just was guessing. I didn't notice she actually did it.
Do you have like a least favorite episode? Because I definitely do.
I think I know what yours is. Oh gosh.
Okay, which one?
I think you're gonna say the one with the gentleman ghost.
This vile city,
Yeah, I told you he's like
when
anti-unions.
the lower classes knew their place.
Yeah, I'm telling you, the bourgeoisie has to calm down. It's outright communism, equity and equality and all that stuff. Yeah, I think they changed a lot of the villains, but I think like going back, the Gentleman Ghost one is still the worst one. And I think it's for obvious reasons. I mean, I think a lot of people who aren't really tuned into like the usual talking points. They
Mhm.
might not notice this, so they might think that I'm being cynical. But really, it's the episode is just socialism 101. It's like they make the villain hate the working class. You have a lot of talks about like union, and then you have this villain who hates, and they even say, "Oh, you would hate to see what Gotham has become nowadays." Sprinkling all these socialists and the communist language like words into this thing, and that's why I hate when they take something and they try to subtly change it or like insert these messages so that they subtly reach the minds of the viewers. And but then when you're onto their playbook, you know what they mean. You know what their buzzwords are. And that episode was literally that. It was that.
And funny enough,
And I
that
was
was
so
actually
excited.
one of the episodes that Batman was one of the major players in. That was like one of the only ones.
DC's Instagram page right now with the villains, and under each villain they have like a quote. And so for Harley Quinn, it's like, I think you should continue on as my patient. Now, doesn't that sound like fun? The quote underneath the Gentleman Ghost is, and it's literally there. It's, "Don't tell me all men are created equal?" Question mark. So
Don't tell me all men are created equal. Yeah.
again, it's like, oh, okay, everyone, equity. Well, there you go. The workers, we have to make sure that the working class is, has their voice, that they're being heard. And it's like, wow, this is just blatant. Well, for a lot of people, it doesn't seem blatant, but
There's a lot of
if
the
you actually,
messaging thrown in there, even if it's not always completely, it's more subtle.
yeah. So I don't know what your least favorite episode one.
I was trying to think.
Yeah.
I was kind of thinking about the Harley one, maybe, or I think the second one of the first couple ones. I honestly they kind of all blended together for me. I think it was probably one of those, or maybe the one where they're chasing like the hit on the Gordon, but it's really Barbara Gordon, not James Gordon. Like there's
Yeah,
a lot
like
of
what
them.
was up with that? It's like we need to create like this over dramatized story of what's happening, and it's like it's about Gordon, but then the big reason is that it's Barbara Gordon. But then if that were the case, why didn't you? Why? What was the point of all this? Like this entire overcomplicated plot line? It
Yeah, like
reminded me of BVS, where you have like Luthor creating this over convoluted storyline, and it's like, oh, you just kind of like the writers just did that to make the story seem interesting, but when in reality you kind of step back and realize, oh, none of this makes sense. There
well
was a much
the
better way of
cop
going about
who
it.
was actually a Easter egg was Jim Corrigan, who becomes a Spectre.
Yeah.
He was like the cop who was gonna take out Barbara Gordon. He was with Montoya. It's like if he didn't want that to happen, he could have just gone and killed Barbara and got the money and moved on, and it wouldn't have even had any problem. But they made a whole thing about it, making it was Jim Gordon, and he could have just avoided all that if he really just wanted the money. Like that's what they ended up happening at the end. It's so convoluted when they did that.
And then also, out of the characters, I think the least damaged, I guess Catwoman was somewhat like the best one, the closest one that you had to the comic books.
Like
And maybe
Clayface,
like,
maybe.
oh yeah, Clayface
I like
kind of
I
too,
liked
yeah.
his. I like the only thing I can say I liked Clayface's voice actor. He was one of the better casted, I think, and he wasn't too bad. And Catwoman, I guess, yeah, was not too changed.
I think Two-Face was interesting, but the thing about that is that, and I think the show points it out, but Bruce Wayne in that scene does not act like a friend, where he questions him at the restaurant and he pushes him to give him an immediate answer about what happened to him, who hurt him. And no friend, no sane person would do that to their friend, where they're just like trying to remind them of their very recent, well, in this case, it's trauma. I kind of don't want to overuse that word, but it is what essentially happened. And then even Alfred points it out, but then immediately Alfred suggests that, oh, he's not the Harvey Dent you knew. And it's like, okay, Alfred, how do you even know about this if you haven't even been there? And even if you were there, why would you then automatically jump to the conclusion that he would instantly turn into a bad guy? None of it made any sense. The show just kind of gives you a bunch of these narratives, and then they expect you to go along with them because you're kind of familiar with the source material, even though they crap all over it in all these other instances.
That's one thing they're very much trying to make it so Bruce Wayne, like he has no empathy or feelings or whatever. I guess they're trying to make him actually like a psychopath. Because even a Bruce Wayne who's Batman and he's tough and all that, he would if Harvey was his friend, he wouldn't have done that. He would have had some care about what was going on and tried to help him. And he didn't show it at all. And that was kind of evident throughout the show that they definitely leaned into this thing that Bruce Wayne's the mask. Because like every time that he was by himself with Alfred, he would change his voice to his deep "I'm pretending to be Batman" voice that he would put
Yeah, he
on.
even like snaps at Harvey, and then like his golem like kind of comments
Yeah.
at this, like his golem comes out.
Is it? Don't start growing a conscience now, dead. Just help yourself. That's all I'm saying. You can still have a life.
His Smeagol
Remember?
Batman came out for
Sorry,
a sec,
Bruce.
and it's like no, and then I understand that it's like a story arc for him. It's like, oh, but then that's his lesson to learn to kind of like go easy on Harvey. But even then, Harvey is treated like a villain, even though at first he really isn't doing. If you think about it, he's just killing a bunch of corrupt people. He's hurting them. He's trying to. He's kind of like he's no different than Batman, and I understand that this is somewhat something that they want to like allude to and make references to. Oh, Harvey Dent and Batman are kind of the same. Well, it's kind of half-assed because Harvey Dent is condemned, whereas Batman is not. And out of all the people who have some kind of hope for Harvey Dent, it's ultimately Barbara Gordon who actually believes in Harvey and not Batman. He's only there to kind of just take care of the guards. So again, this is like really abysmal stuff if you think really just
Well,
think about it. I understand.
they allude like they're going to like turn him around at the end of the show. Because the whole thing of the little things that irritated me is that he kept calling Alfred Pennyworth the whole show, and then he's like Alfred.
Yes. So you said.
The situation's escalating, and you're wasting my time, Pennyworth.
Of us
Thank you,
against
Pennyworth.
something else.
Thanks, Alfred.
There we go. And it's like, oh, he's the start of his redemption arc. But it's like Batman was not like this in year one. Like he wasn't like completely like nuts and not caring or anything and completely sucked into Batman like the way they portrayed him in this show. So it's not like accurate to that at all. And I still didn't see enough besides like one little thing. I think that's what they're trying to do, but I don't think they're going to do it properly if they get to move on to another season.
The Pennyworth stuff didn't bother me as much, but now that you kind of mention it and everything we're talking about here, I guess I kind of see that maybe I was part of like them trying to show that he was kind of like a darker person, and now he's calling him Alfred, and
Well,
therefore they're showing up.
even when they show the flashback when his parents got killed, and he's like having his standing on the bed, I'm gonna spend my life warring on criminals kind of moment, and then he goes and runs into the bed. Alfred's bedroom is like, "You're gonna help me."
I'm gonna kill you.
I swear on the grave of my parents, I will avenge them and fight war on criminals.
And you're going to help me.
Jeez.
I don't remember what he said, but he rushed into the
Yeah.
bedroom, and it's like weird, and it's just like this weird dynamic they have, and it's like this is his like father figure that raises him and takes care of him, and he just treats him not like Batman treats Alfred, and I personally that bugged me a lot. And the fact that it's just not a Batman show. Like Batman is a side character
Nope.
throughout. Over half of the episodes are completely devoid of like Batman being a major factor, and he might have like a scene or a fight scene maybe. There's actually not that much action in this show either. There's like I could probably count on one hand how many legitimate action scenes there are in the show. It was not an exciting show. It was pretty boring most of the time, and it was what we expected, and it didn't change my thoughts at all. It was probably even worse than what I was expecting, honestly.
Yeah, I think a lot of people will think that it was mediocre or just okay or even fine. But I think they're really getting like I think fine if that's what you think. You're entitled to your opinion. But I think the hard facts are that it's really just disrespectful, and I think it's really leaning into things and the themes that you see in all these other shows that are really just destroying the franchises from the inside. And just because it might seem like it's more subtle, I would actually argue it's not. And I think the fact that even they decided to do such a switch up for the 1940s, that right there is a huge indicator. And even the comments that Bruce Timm made, I think it's inexcusable what they did.
They didn't show,
And that,
the people making the show didn't show any love or care. Like, you didn't feel that at all. Even though these were,
yeah,
a lot of these people that were making the show should, because they've worked on some good stuff. Like Bruce Timm has done good stuff, even though, like we've mentioned, he did it with Paul Dini. James Tucker did a lot of stuff like with Batman the Brave and the Bold, which a lot of that's really good. They had, what was it,
Ed Brubaker
Ed
was on
Brubaker,
this.
who's done Batman comics, Captain America comics, is pretty good. I think I've enjoyed a lot of his stuff. He was helping on it, and then of course we have the two, the brains of the operation, Matt Reeves and Jar Jar Abrams, were
Yeah.
executive producers. I don't know what they actually did, but they had enough influence on their show, definitely.
If you like the show, I would say try to look at it from like a standpoint of like what does this do for the character? Is it better? Does it set him in a better direction, or is it like, or does it do nothing, or does it do it for the worse? You can go over every single creative decision they made, and I think you would find a lot more for the second and third option. And I think that's tell people to kind of pay attention to that and do not just let go of that for the few moments that you thought worked.
There's a lot of divisiveness in comments and reactions to previous videos we've made about talking about this show. So we decided to watch it, and we did, and nothing's really changed for us. That's our thoughts
Yeah,
on this show.
that's always a common theme. It's like, well, you haven't watched it yet,
Now
so
we
you should
have.
watch it.
We watched
And then
all
it's
10
like,
episodes. I hope you're happy.
and
All
now my
10.
opinion hasn't really changed. And even if I went into it with the best of intentions, I really can't ignore all the faults that they made. Sometimes you really don't have to watch stuff to kind of like be able to piece stuff together. Sure, we can expand on it by watching it, but you have a really good idea of what you're kind of getting yourself into, even without needing to watch it, as is the case with a lot of TV shows right now. You can't tell me that you thought that She-Hulk was potentially going to be a good show. There are people who thought that, but I think a lot of people who just rubbed their brain cells together, we were able to kind of telegraph the whole. They were able to telegraph
Yeah.
their entire show without us needing to watch it in its entirety. And you have a lot of instances of that right now.
Well, we definitely, it's not like we wouldn't want a cool Batman show, but this was not it. So those were our thoughts on this show. We watched all 10 episodes, so maybe you don't have to go through what we did, but if you did, I'm sorry. And anyway, thanks for watching. If you guys want to check out Greg over here, he's got his own channel, Gregory Gaming.
Yes.
It'll be linked in the comments. He does live streams pretty much every couple times a week, once a week. So you go over and check him out, leave him a comment, a like, a subscribe, and you can do the same here on our channel. But thank you so much for checking out this video, and we'll talk to you guys later. Oh, yeah. Where have we seen that before? Hey, it's like Return the Joker. Remember that? Remember? The glove's gonna slip off.